I have always believed that every machine speaks twice, once when it breaks, and once when you listen. Engines confess if you ask them the right questions. The scrape that isn't just a belt. The rattle that belongs to a heat shield and not the frame. The small cry that says, "Save me now," or "Pay later." People, I've learned, make the same sounds when they're about to leave you. The trouble is, you can't run a stethoscope over a promise. You can only hold it in your hands and hear how hollow it island. The morning it started, the town smelled like hot tar and oranges. August in Fairview will do that to you, fresh asphalt on Main and the grocer slicing fruit like a card trick. I was in Bay 2 under a 2010 Camry with a fuel line that had ideas about immortality. Grease on my hands, brass taste in my mouth, the radio low because Shelby liked country when she worked the front desk. My fiancée, my almost wife, she'd started coming in on Fridays to help with invoices, said staring at spreadsheets at the dental office made her feel like one of those houseplants that look alive until you touch the leaves and they crumble. Here, she said, the numbers smelled like work. She was late, but Shelby was always late the way the rainfall is late, inevitable in principle, imprecise in practice. At 9:40, I wiped my hands and called her. The call didn't ring. It went straight to voicemail with the same bright voice she'd recorded 6 months earlier. "It's me. If I didn't pick up, I'm probably laughing. Leave something worth laughing about." That had been charming the first 100 times. At 9:50, the shop phone rang instead. It was Alma, who knows everybody's calendar because she delivers mail and collects rumors with the same even gait. "Marcus," she said, soft, the way you talk to a dog that doesn't know it's been hit yet. "Don't go to Pine Square." "I'm at work," I said. "What's in Pine Square?" "Just don't go," she said. The line clicked. You could live a whole life in this town and never be surprised again. But Pine Square is where surprises go to find cameras. They built the fountain bigger last year, added an ugly stage with a steel canopy that looks like a rib cage. Someone is always cutting a ribbon beneath it. I went anyway. I told Tucker, the kid who started last month, to watch the Camry and not confuse the return and supply lines again. He saluted me with a 10mm socket like he'd seen in a movie. The square was already a crowd before I arrived. I recognized 3 city councilors, 2 pastors, and a woman who sells candles made of beeswax and divorce. The fountain was off, the stage was on, and there he was, Adrian Frost, regional CEO of Norland Dental, a man who wore a suit like it was invented to keep his body from spilling secrets. They say the devil has horns. In Fairview, he has a corporate card and a PR team. Shelby stood beside him in a blue dress I'd never seen before. It managed to be candid and expensive at the same time, like a photograph taken by someone you love while you weren't looking. She was brighter than the sky because the sky had the decency to be ordinary. Her hair, pinned back, exposed a pair of earrings that weren't from my world. Her hands were empty, and then they weren't. Adrian had taken one in his left, and in his right, he held a ring case the size of a secret. He looked out at us and smiled like morning. "Friends," he said into a microphone. His voice poured out of 4 black speakers and down the brick buildings. "When life brings you someone who turns your hours into meaning, you honor that gift in the open." He turned to Shelby. "You've made me brave." He knelt. The ring looked like a star that had the nerve to fall during the day. Cameras lifted phones, 1 proper DSLR, a local news lens that could smell blood. "Say yes," someone shouted. She didn't look for me. She didn't scan the crowd for the man she had promised to marry in October. She only looked at the ring, and then at Adrian, and something in her face softened like butter in sunlight. I had always thought it would be anger that would end me. It was stillness. It is a skill, to be present for your own humiliation, to notarize it in the ledger of the world. I stood near the statue of the soldier pointing forever at the bank, and I learned that even stone can be complicit. When she said yes, it was smaller than you would imagine. A word meant for one man, but amplified for all. The crowd made a sound like relief and profit. Alma's hand found my elbow. "Not here," she whispered. "You'll spend what you don't have." I left before the kiss. Dignity is a finite resource people spend to make pain shorter. I've wasted too much in my life. I decided I would hoard this. Back at the shop, Tucker had crossed his lines like a boy who confuses veins with arteries. I took the wrench from him and fixed it without talking. The day unspooled. 2 oil changes, 1 inspection sticker, a truck that needed rotors, An old man who paid cash and left me a peach from his garden as if kindness could be change. At 5 I locked up. The quiet in an empty garage is not silence. It is the sound of tools returning to their own thoughts. I made coffee, though it would keep me awake for all the wrong hours. I sat on the stool by the alignment rack and counted the shadows as the sun crawled away. I had not cried reflex, training, vanity, I don't know. At 52 you learn that tears are just another leak to diagnose. My phone glowed on the workbench. One message from a number I didn't know. The area code was the city. Marcus, it said. You don't know me. I believe we are on the same side. If you have one left, meet me at the Wick. Back room, 7 p.m. I have a story you deserve. Be old and old. Stories are currency here. The Wick is the only bar in town you can enter sober and leave with your self-respect intact. Dark wood, bartender who wears a tie on purpose, a jukebox that plays vinyl even when you feed it an app. I walked there because walking is what you do when your car is full of ghosts. The back room was separated by a velvet curtain that had drunk more smoke than any one man. She was already seated, a woman in her late 40s, hair grayer than mine in a way that suited her, a legal pad open like a confession. She looked like a schoolteacher who could set a bone with her hands. You're Marcus, she said, and stood. I'm Claire Wren. I work in Norland's compliance office. Today was the third such proposal Mr. Frost has staged in 2 years. I sat, because you sit when the world changes shape. Third? I said. Women do that more than once. Not the same woman, she said. Different towns, different rings, same cameras. It's a pattern, something he does before an acquisition or after a scandal. He launders reputation through romance. And this time, she paused, reading me. He needed Shelby because she makes him look like a man who can be loved by the people he underpays. She was my fiancée, I said. The words felt like they had edges. Island was. Claire folded her hands. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because you know her, and because you own something he wants. My pride, I said. Your land, she said. The lot behind your shop. Norland's expansion plan needs the east access road. They can't build their flagship without a right-of-way. Your right-of-way. I laughed then, once, because the body will try any release valve. He thinks she'll what? Bring me a casserole and a contract? Claire slid a folder across the table. Inside were emails printed in grayscale, arrows in red pen, phrases, pre-engagement activation, community optics, acquire at discount if adversarial. I read until the sentences turned to noise. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to listen, she said, because machines aren't the only things that speak twice. Adrian has made enemies more patient than I am. He's built a palace out of paper and press releases. If you sign, he wins. If you refuse, he will find a way to bankrupt you, unless someone changes the story he's selling. And that someone is me? For now, she said. But not alone. She tapped another page. A schedule for an upcoming charity gala. Guest list thick with names that made local judges run their tongues over their teeth. He's going to announce a new clinic there. He'll bring Shelby. You will be invited, in a manner of speaking. I shook my head. I fix cars. Aspo. Asked in life to in the redder and reigned it then there's not of the tanned. You fix what people break, she said. Right now he's breaking the town. And if you won't do it for us, do it because he proposed to your fiancée on a stage built with our taxes. The bartender brought 2 waters as if he knew we'd forgotten to order anything that could ruin what we were about to say. Claire lowered her voice. There's one more thing, she said. Shelby didn't start this to hurt you, but she's in it now, and she's not safe. 7. The room tilted, just slightly, like a boat considering a new shoreline. What do you mean? She knows about Adrian's side fund, Claire said. He hides executive perks as community investments and buries losses as philanthropy. The feds don't care about love stories. They care about money that pretends to be something else. I stared at the legal pad, at the shape of her handwriting, at the way the loops on her G's closed like small doors. Outside, someone fed the jukebox a song that had learned how to hurt without being loud. I realized then that vengeance is not a thunderclap. It's a voltage you learn to carry without dying. What happens if I say yes to you? I asked. Then we teach him a language he doesn't speak, she said. Patience, documentation, consequence. And if I say no, then you go home, she said, and wait for him to take something else. Shelby texted me at 7:53. Can we talk? Tonight? The words were tender, like a bandage offered by the hand that made the cut. I looked at Claire. She wants to meet. Good, Claire said. Let her. Listen, not with your feelings, with the part of you that hears a warn bearing from 2 bays away. And Marcus, she added, standing. Don't tell her about me yet. Not until you know whether she's the one who left, or the one who's still leaving. She slipped me a card. No company name. Just a number, and the back stamped with a quote I recognized from an old manual. Trust the symptom. It's the only honest part. I left the wick and walked to the river. The water there is brown and honest, and it has watched men do worse than this. I rehearsed what I would say to Shelby. I promised myself I would not ask why, because why is a hole and I had a shop to keep upright. Instead, I would ask how long and what now. When I got home, the front porch light had been left on by a version of me that still believed lights could welcome. Shelby sat on the steps. That blue dress turned midnight under the bulb. The ring on her finger flickered like a siren from far away. I didn't know you'd see, she said, standing. I wanted to tell you first. Then why didn't you? I asked, and heard how calm I sounded. Because I was afraid of the sound it would make, she said, voice breaking. The sound of me choosing a life that didn't include you. A siren sounded then, not the ring, not the street, but the real kind. Somewhere near the square. People ran toward it, because people always run toward other people's tragedies when they are fresh. Shelby looked past me as if the noise had given her permission to be anywhere but here. You should come inside, I said, and opened the door. She hesitated, then stepped across a threshold that had once promised us both more than it could afford. Marcus, she said, and when she looked at me, I finally heard it, the second sound, the one you only catch if you've spent your life listening for what breaks next. What did he ask you to sign? I said. She flinched. Who told you? No one, I said. Engines talk, remember? So do people. And I think you've been asked to sell something that doesn't belong to you. She swallowed. I need to show you something, she said. But if I do, there's no going back. From the street, the sirens grew louder, and with them, the thin beginning of smoke. Somewhere, another man's day was catching fire. I stepped aside, and Shelby walked in, carrying the smell of someone else's applause. Then don't go back, I said. Tell me the truth. She reached into her purse and drew out a second phone, cheap and scuffed, not the one she used to call her mother on Sundays. She powered it on, and a message lit the screen. Tonight. After hours. Bring him. Whose number is that? I asked. Adrian's head of security, she said, voice barely above a breath. He thinks you'll sign if you see what's waiting at the clinic. And if you don't. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Outside, the sirens arrived and stopped, the way a heart does when it sees the edge of what it can bear. Then we'll go, I said, hearing in my own words the click of a ratchet finding the tooth it needed. But not for him. For who then? Shelby asked. For the part of this town, I said, that still believes proposals should be private and crimes should be public. She looked at me with a complicated mercy I didn't yet deserve. You're not the man I left, she said. I am, I said. I'm just done being polite about it. End of present. Outside, the smoke lifted into the late summer heat like a dark idea. I picked up my keys. The Camry in Bay 2 would wait. Engines forgive the men who fix them. People are more particular. Let's go, I said. Let's hear what their story sounds like when no one's clapping. And as we stepped off the porch into a night that smelled like trouble and citrus, I understood. The sirens weren't warning us away. They were telling us exactly where to begin. The night after the square felt like a borrowed hourglass, every grain of sand moving slower than my pulse. Shelby sat in my living room like a stranger, the cheap second phone on the coffee table glowing faintly, as though it could hear us breathe. The word tonight still burned in my mind, paired with the threat of Adrian's security man. I had been trained by machines to look for symptoms. Now, all I could see were symptoms of betrayal, symptoms of fear, symptoms of something I was only beginning to diagnose. She didn't speak right away. She watched the glow of that phone as if waiting for it to deliver absolution. Marcus, she said finally, her voice small in a house that had always held her laughter larger than life. I need you to believe me. I didn't go into this thinking of him. I just drifted. He noticed me in ways you'd stopped noticing. Then it turned into something else, something I couldn't stop. I wanted to laugh, Wanted to show her that I could still notice. Right now, the tremor in her hands, the way her eyes refused to land on mine. But I didn't laugh. I asked the only question that mattered. Are you his fiancée now, or mine? Her lips parted, but silence arrived instead. That was an answer all its own. By 7:30, we were on the road to the clinic site. Shelby had insisted, I come, had said Adrian's men would interpret refusal as defiance, and defiance as open war. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. What I wanted most was to see how far she had fallen into Frost's world, and whether she was pulling me down after her or pushing me toward something else. The clinic stood on the edge of town, a white skeleton of steel and drywall that smelled of gypsum and ambition. Security lights carved the dark into ugly slices, and 2 black SUVs idled near the entrance. A man in a suit cut too tight for his shoulders stepped forward when we arrived. He had the body of a boxer and the eyes of a man who'd learned that loyalty could be bought by the hour. He opened the door for Shelby but looked at me like I was a bad idea. Inside, the unfinished lobby echoed with every footstep. Frost himself waited near a folding table littered with blueprints and a bottle of champagne. He smiled, the same way he had at Pine Square, but here the smile had no audience to deceive only me. Marcus, he said warmly, as though greeting a brother-in-law at Thanksgiving. I was hoping you'd come. Saves us both time. I said nothing. Shelby hovered near his side, her body angled toward him, but her eyes flickered toward me with something that looked like warning. Frost uncorked the champagne and poured into plastic cups. He offered one to me, as if betrayal could be toasted like a new house. Your land, he said simply, is the key to this whole project. With your right-of-way, we can expand eastward, double the clinic's size, bring in hundreds of jobs. Without it, well, let's just say the town will know who kept progress away. He slid a contract across the table, the ink fresh, my name typed clean on the signature line. You mean without it, you can't launder your empire, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. And you can't use Shelby as the ribbon on your box. For the first time, his smile thinned. Strong words for a mechanic, he said softly. But mechanics know leverage, don't they? One wrong move, and the whole frame collapses. Think carefully. This is your chance to be part of something bigger than oil stains and carburetors. Shelby flinched at his words, as if even she recognized the cruelty wrapped in charm. Adrian, please, she began, but he silenced her with a touch of his hand, as though she were a prop he could set aside until needed. I pushed the contract back. Number. The room chilled. Frost's security man stepped closer. Frost himself only sighed, as though disappointed by a stubborn child. Then you've chosen the harder road, and harder roads have a way of breaking axles. That night, Shelby and I drove home in silence. She tried once, twice, to speak, but the words failed. Finally, she whispered, I didn't know he would push it like that. I thought. Her sentence trailed, leaving me to fill in the rest. I thought he would be kind. I thought he would let me have both of you. I thought I could stand on 2 shores without drowning. When we reached my house, she didn't come in. She stood at the door with that cheap phone clutched like a talisman. Marcus, she said, eyes glistening, I don't expect forgiveness, but you need to know, he's dangerous, and once you're against him, he doesn't stop. I leaned in the doorway, too tired for comfort. Neither do I. She left, and for the first time in years, I slept alone in that house. The walls seemed to sigh with the absence. The following morning brought another surprise. Alma at my shop, holding a letter with no return address. Inside was a single page of financial records, Norland Dental's side fund, numbers circled in red, the kind Claire had hinted at. But this time, there was a note scrawled at the bottom. They're watching you. Protect Shelby. Trust only what bleeds when cut. I stared at the paper, feeling the weight of it settle like a wrench in my hand. Someone else out there wanted Frost exposed. Someone who knew the cost of lies written in ledgers. But whether they were ally or trap, I couldn't yet tell. By dusk, Shelby called again. Her voice trembled. They're making me go to the gala. Adrian wants me on his arm when he announces the expansion. Marcus, please don't go near it. But her plea carried the opposite weight. If Frost wanted her as a trophy, then the gala was the stage where his mask would slip. And I intended to be there, not as a guest, but as a witness armed with truth. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Claire's folder on one side and the anonymous letter on the other. Between them, my life looked less like a love story and more like a blueprint for war. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, bitter enough to keep me awake until morning. The shop smelled faintly of oil and solitude. Somewhere in town, Shelby was still wearing Frost's ring, still trying to straddle a line that no longer existed. I thought of her hands, trembling when she held that second phone. I thought of Frost's words, dripping with contempt, and I thought of the sirens we'd heard the night before, warnings, perhaps, or invitations. I made a choice then. Not to forgive, not yet, but to fight not just for me, not even for Shelby, but for a town too easily dazzled by suits and promises. Frost thought he could humiliate me and walk away richer. He hadn't counted on the patience of a man who fixed what others abandoned. And as I closed the folder, I knew this was only the beginning. The betrayal had cracked the frame. Now it was time to see how much weight the whole structure could bear before it came crashing down. The days after refusing Frost's contract unfolded like a slow collapse. A man doesn't realize how many roots his life has in the soil until someone starts cutting them one by one. The first blow came quietly, a notice taped to the shop's front door when I arrived one morning. Zoning violation, unauthorized storage of hazardous fluids. My shop had been there 20 years, and suddenly the city decided my oil drums were a threat to public safety. A fine was listed at the bottom, larger than my monthly profit. I peeled the paper off with hands that smelled of grease and fury. By noon, 2 regular customers had canceled their appointments, both claiming they were going out of town. I knew better. In a town like Fairview, people don't vanish unless someone tells them it's wise to. Word had spread. Marcus Hale was trouble. Trouble doesn't get referrals. Trouble doesn't get business. That night, I sat in the garage with the lights off. The air carried the tang of steel, oil, and the ghosts of engines I'd brought back to life. I asked myself what kind of man loses his fiancée, his livelihood, and his reputation in the space of a week. The answer was simple. Me. I wasn't alone in my downfall. Shelby called every evening, her voice thin, her excuses thinner. I had to stand by him, Marcus. He said if I didn't, he'd ruin you faster. Faster. As if what I was enduring was mercy. I wanted to hate her, and sometimes I did. But then I remembered the girl who used to sit on the shop's counter and read invoices aloud just to make me laugh at the numbers. She hadn't been swallowed whole yet. Frost wore her like jewelry, but jewelry can be stolen back. Claire appeared again at the Wick a few nights later, her legal pad full of scribbles and underlines. She looked at me with the frankness of someone who'd already chosen the dangerous side. They'll strip you piece by piece, she warned. Licenses, suppliers, bank loans. Frost has friends in every office that matters. If you want to survive, you need to go public before he buries you. Go public with what? I asked bitterly. That my fiancé ran away with a CEO? That I fix cars while he fixes headlines? She slid another document across the table. Expense reports, doctor donations, transfers into shell accounts. With this, she said, and with testimony, people will believe you if you're willing to bleed in front of them. I laughed then, a hollow sound. I've been bleeding since the square. They just call it rust. The second blow landed harder. My bank manager, a man who'd shaken my hand for decades, called to inform me my loan renewal was denied. Economic climate, he said. Risk assessment. I heard Frost's voice under his. Without that loan, the shop had maybe 3 months before debt swallowed it whole. I walked home that night past Pine Square, still haunted by Shelby's yes. The fountain gurgled as if mocking me. I wanted to throw a wrench into its polished tiles. But I kept walking. Pride was the only currency I had left, and I couldn't afford to spend it on vandalism. Then came the fire. Not metaphor, not rumor, but real flame. Someone had smashed a window at the shop and tossed a bottle of accelerant. Tucker, the kid I'd hired, had stayed late working on his Mustang and nearly didn't make it out alive. When I arrived, the fire department had doused the worst of it, but the walls were black, the smell acrid. Tucker's face was pale under soot. They wanted to scare you, he said. Not me. I put a hand on his shoulder. Then they failed, because now I'm done being scared. The insurance adjuster shook his head, muttering about suspicious circumstances and possible arson. I knew what he meant. No payout. Frost's reach extended even into ashes. The town began to whisper. Some said I'd brought it on myself. Some said I'd lost my mind. But there were others, quiet nods from old customers, envelopes slipped under my door with small bills and handwritten prayers. Betrayal had made me visible in a way loyalty never had, and through it all, Shelby's calls grew more frantic. He watches everything, Marcus. He reads my emails, tracks my car. I can't breathe in his house. Her voice cracked like glass. I made a mistake, but it's too late to walk away. It's not too late, I told her. But it's going to hurt. The breaking point came when Alma delivered another letter. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten, shaky but deliberate. He'll use the gala to announce his expansion. He's laundering money through charity. Bring proof, or the town will never believe you. At the bottom, a signature I recognized from years ago. John Riker, a former accountant at Norland who'd vanished after a scandal no one ever fully explained. His name was a rumor, a ghost. If he was alive and writing, then Frost's empire had cracks wider than I'd imagined. That night, I sat in my ruined shop, the walls blackened, the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes. I looked at the evidence spread before me, Claire's files, Riker's letter, Shelby's second phone. Each was a thread, and together they wove a rope strong enough to hang Frost if I dared pull it tight. I thought of my father, a man who'd taught me that machines and men both obey the same rule. Neglect kills faster than misuse. I had neglected myself, my pride, even my love. Now I was paying the price. But neglect has an opposite. Resolve. Resolve is the reason a mechanic rebuilds an engine everyone else declares dead. Resolve is why a man stands up when the world tells him to lie down. I had lost ground. I had been humiliated, bankrupted, and burned. But in losing, I found the fire I'd been missing all along. I wasn't going to wait for Frost to bury me. I was going to dig him out first. The morning after the fire, I stood in the ruins of my shop and felt the weight of 2 decades settle on my shoulders. Charred rubber, curled like black petals on the floor. The steel beams above me sweated smoke. My life's work had been reduced to a crime scene. Tucker swept in silence, his broom dragging over ash. He looked too young to be staring at ruin. I'll rebuild, I told him. My voice cracked, but I meant it. This place isn't finished. He nodded, not because he believed me, but because he needed me to believe myself. That was enough. By noon, Claire arrived. She walked the perimeter like an investigator, snapping photos, jotting notes. They've escalated, she said grimly. Frost wants you cornered before the gala. If he can make you look unstable, you're less dangerous. Unstable? I gestured at the scorched walls. He torched my shop. What does stable look like to him? She held up a folder. Riker reached out again. He says he has detailed ledgers enough to expose the side fund, the phantom charities, everything. But he'll only meet in person, tonight. Why me? I asked. Why not hand it to the feds? Because he doesn't trust anyone else. Frost ruined his life. He wants someone with skin in the game. She studied me. That's you, Marcus. I stared at the ruins around me. Maybe skin in the game wasn't enough. Maybe I was all bone and fire now. The meeting place was an abandoned rail depot 2 towns over. The tracks lay rusted, the windows blown out, graffiti telling the stories of kids who wanted to leave but never did. I drove there with Claire in the passenger seat, the road humming under tires that carried more weight than rubber should bear. Inside the depot, John Riker waited. Time had hollowed him. His suit hung loose, his eyes darted like a man always expecting footsteps behind him. But his hands, steady, precise, clutched a leather briefcase. You're Marcus Hale, he said. His voice was tired but sharp. I've heard of you. Mechanic. Stubborn, loyal to a fault. That's why Frost hates you already. I crossed my arms. Then give me something worth the hate. He opened the briefcase. Inside were ledgers, receipts, copies of wire transfers. Money funneled through shell nonprofits into Frost's personal accounts. Payments disguised as community outreach. Bonuses for executives hidden in medical grants. It was a cathedral of lies, built stone by stone, page by page. This, Riker said, is what will end him. But it can't just be numbers. You need a story. The town won't care about digits, they'll care about betrayal, about Shelby, about the way Frost parades her as a trophy. Tie these ledgers to his personal sins, and people will listen. Claire leaned forward. And the gala? Riker nodded. He's announcing a massive donation that doesn't exist. That's when you strike. Leak the files. Force him into the open while the cameras roll. I looked at the briefcase. It might as well have been dynamite. And what do you want in return? Riker's face softened. Nothing. Just to see him fall. He took everything from me. My name, my career, my family. I want to die knowing he doesn't win. I took the briefcase. It felt heavier than any engine block I'd ever lifted. Then consider the first step taken. That night, Shelby appeared at my door again. She looked thinner, her eyes ringed with shadows. The ring Frost had given her still glittered on her hand, but it looked like a shackle now. He's planning something, she whispered. Adrian's paranoid. He thinks someone inside is leaking. He's questioned me twice, asked if I'd spoken to you. Marcus, he's dangerous. I set the briefcase on the table between us. I know. And I'm going to show the town exactly how dangerous. Her eyes widened as she saw the documents. She reached out, then pulled back as if afraid the papers would burn her fingers. Where did you get these? From someone he ruined before you. Her voice trembled. If he finds out you have this, he'll kill you. I met her gaze. Then I'd better make sure everyone sees it before he can try. The days leading to the gala were a blur of planning. Claire worked the contacts she still trusted, journalists, auditors, one sympathetic councilman. Tucker patched the shop as best he could, refusing to abandon me despite my warnings. And Shelby drifted between two worlds, her body at Frost's side, her heart bleeding through midnight calls to me. I should have cast her out, shut the door, let betrayal lie where it fell. But each time I heard her voice break, each time she whispered she was sorry, some stubborn part of me remembered the woman who once believed in my quiet strength. Whether she was ally or liability, I couldn't decide. I only knew she was still part of the fight. The night of the gala arrived like a storm disguised in silk. The ballroom at the Fairview Grand was dressed in gold and glass, chandeliers blazing, tables groaning with food no one would eat. The town's elite buzzed like flies around a corpse, waiting for Frost to declare himself savior once more. I wasn't invited, but Claire had secured us a way in through the caterer's entrance. I wore my best suit, faded, pressed, but honest. In the mirror before leaving, I'd hardly recognized myself. Not the mechanic, not the betrayed fiancé, but something harder, forged in fire. From the balcony above the stage, I watched Frost enter with Shelby on his arm. Cameras flashed. He raised a hand like a king, acknowledging loyal subjects. My chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from the sheer audacity of the lie. When the speeches began, Claire slipped me a signal. The files were ready to leak online. One push of a button would send Frost's empire collapsing. But timing mattered. We needed the cameras rolling, the crowd listening. We needed him mid-lie. Frost tapped the microphone. Friends, tonight I am proud to announce Norland's largest charitable initiative, yet a multi-million-dollar clinic expansion that will transform our community. Applause roared. He smiled, savoring it. And none of it would be possible without the support of people like my fiancée, Shelby. He lifted her hand, the diamond blazing. That was my cue. I stepped onto the balcony rail, my voice cutting through the applause. Tell them where the money really goes, Adrian. Tell them about the shell funds, the fake charities, the way you buy love with stolen dollars. The room froze. Cameras turned. Frost looked up, his mask slipping for the first time. Claire hit send. The screens behind the stage, meant to display glossy images of smiling patients, instead filled with scanned ledgers, highlighted numbers, damning evidence. Gasps spread like wildfire. Frost's voice wavered. This is fabrication. But Shelby stepped forward, her voice carrying in the stunned silence. It's true. I've seen it. I've lived it. He promised me love. But he bought me like he buys everything else. And I'm done being bought. She tore the ring from her finger and hurled it across the stage. It skittered into the crowd like a coin no one dared claim. The applause didn't return. Instead, murmurs of outrage, shouts, camera flashes bursting like gunfire. And for the first time, Adrian Frost looked afraid. The ballroom fell into chaos after Shelby's words. You could hear the sound of 100 truths catching fire all at once. Gasps, shouts, the snap of cameras desperate to capture scandal. Frost stood frozen, the spotlight catching sweat on his forehead, his smile curdling into something brittle. For a man like him, control was oxygen. And I had just cut off his air. He raised his hands, desperate. These are lies, he barked. doctored documents by bitter ex-employees, and his eyes flicked to me on the balcony. Angry mechanics who don't understand the business world. But the crowd wasn't buying it. The screens kept flipping through more evidence, each slide another nail in his coffin. Bank statements, false donations, emails with his signature. Claire had arranged it so no one could turn the feed off until it ran its course. The truth was on autopilot now. Shelby stepped down from the stage and into the crowd, her head high. "He used me to clean his image," she said, voice trembling but loud. "But love isn't a press release, and I won't stand beside a thief." The room erupted in murmurs. Some faces looked stunned, others vindicated, and then I saw them, two of Frost's security men slipping toward the side exits, hands to their earpieces. Claire whispered in my ear from behind. "He's going to run." "Not yet," I said. "Not until he faces me." I descended the stairs from the balcony as the crowd shifted like water. People made way, curious, afraid. Frost saw me coming, and for the first time since the square, his composure cracked. "You think you can ruin me?" he hissed, his voice dropping low as I reached the stage. "You're nothing but grease under my nails. This town loves me. They always will." I looked out at the crowd, neighbors, customers, people who once brought me peaches or paid me in kindness when cash was tight. Their faces weren't filled with love for him anymore. They were filled with doubt. "You're right," I told him. "I am grease under your nails, but grease stains, and tonight, everyone here is going to remember the mark you left on all of us." The councilman who once fawned over Frost stepped forward, demanding answers. Reporters shouted questions. The gala had turned into a trial, and Frost was the defendant. But Frost wasn't done fighting. He leaned closer, voice sharp enough to cut. "You don't know who you're playing with, Hale. This isn't just money. This goes deeper. If I go down, others go with me, and they won't let that happen." It wasn't bluster. His eyes carried the weight of something bigger, something more dangerous than I'd imagined. A network, not just one man. Claire heard him too. She pressed closer, whispering, "He's right. He's not alone. But if we let him walk tonight, he'll bury us." The security men returned, flanking the stage. The crowd pressed forward, torn between fear and fury. For a heartbeat, I thought Frost might actually escape, shielded by the same power that had always protected him. And then Shelby did something none of us expected. She grabbed the microphone. "There's one more thing," she said, voice breaking. "Adrian's not just laundering money. He's hiding losses by stealing identities, patients, employees, anyone who crossed him. He used my name too. I found the files." The ballroom fell silent. Frost's face drained of color. That was the twist I hadn't seen coming. Shelby hadn't just been his fiancée, she'd been his pawn in more ways than one. "Liar," Frost roared, but the panic in his voice betrayed him. She pointed at him, hand shaking but steady enough. "Check his servers. Check the clinic records. He's not just a fraud, he's a criminal." Reporters surged. Phones recorded every second. And Frost, cornered, finally snapped. He lunged toward Shelby, but I moved faster. Years of torquing wrenches and hauling transmissions gave me strength I hadn't realized I still carried. I caught his arm, twisted, and shoved him back. He stumbled against the podium, papers scattering like guilty confessions. "This ends tonight," I told him. Frost looked at me, eyes blazing with a hatred that promised future wars. "You'll regret this, Hale. I'll bury you so deep no one remembers your name." I leaned closer, my voice low enough for only him. "I've already been buried," and I crawled back up. The police arrived minutes later, tipped off by someone, maybe Riker, maybe one of Claire's contacts. Frost was escorted out in handcuffs, still shouting, still swearing vengeance. The crowd filmed every second, their phones capturing the moment the untouchable man was finally touched by justice. But victory carried its price. Outside, under the cold night air, Claire pulled me aside. "Marcus, this isn't over. You saw his face. Frost is part of something larger. Taking him down means they'll come after you now." I nodded. I knew she was right. Yet as I looked at Shelby, standing pale and shaken but free of his shadow, I also knew something else. I wasn't afraid anymore. The town had seen the truth. The mask was off. And if more battles were coming, then so be it. I'd spent my life fixing broken things. Maybe it was time I learned how to fix myself too. That night, as I walked home past Pine Square, I stopped where I'd once stood humiliated, watching Shelby say yes to another man. The fountain trickled quietly, its waters reflecting the street lamps. This time, there were no cameras, no applause, only me. I closed my eyes and breathed. The sound I heard wasn't betrayal anymore. It was resolve. The second sound, the one you only catch if you've learned to listen for what breaks next. And I knew. The fight wasn't finished, but neither was I. Morning came slowly after the gala, as if even the sun was cautious about what it would find in Fairview. News vans lined Main Street. Reporters clustered at diners and on courthouse steps. For once, people weren't talking about engines or small-town gossip, they were talking about Adrian Frost. His mugshot stared from every paper, his empire suddenly fragile. The ledgers, the false charities, the identity theft, all of it had been dragged into daylight. He was indicted within 48 hours. Yet the victory felt less like fireworks and more like a weary exhale. Because justice isn't a sunrise. It's a slow, grinding wheel. And sometimes it crushes the people pushing hardest. The first days after his arrest were hard. My shop was still a scar of smoke and broken glass. The bank refused to restore my loan. Some townsfolk who had cheered in the ballroom now avoided me on the street, as if afraid association with me would draw Frost's shadow back onto them. But there were others. Alma brought fresh bread every morning and left it at my door without a word. Tucker showed up at the shop with a hammer and paint, determined to rebuild one wall at a time. And Claire stayed, steady as a lighthouse. She worked nights drafting reports for federal investigators, her pen moving as if she could write Frost's downfall into permanence. "You've done more than anyone," she told me one evening as we looked over the charred remains of Bay 2. "But you need to think about what comes next. Revenge isn't a home. You have to live somewhere." I nodded, though the truth was I didn't know what came next. For 52 years, I'd been defined by what I could fix: cars, promises, Shelby's laughter. Now I had to fix myself, and that was an engine I didn't yet understand. Shelby came to see me a week later. She stood in the doorway of my house like she had the night after the square, but this time there was no ring on her finger, no perfume meant for someone else's arm. "I've left him," she said quietly. "For good." I studied her face. She looked older than she had a month ago, lines of guilt etched deep. She tried to smile, but it broke halfway. "I don't expect you to take me back," she whispered. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly. I let myself be dazzled, and I hurt the only man who ever saw me for who I was." For a long time, I didn't answer. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to leave her words in the dust. Another part remembered the woman who once brought coffee to the shop just so we could share a quiet morning before work. Finally, I said, "Shelby, forgiveness isn't a key. It doesn't open the same door twice, but maybe it can open a different one." She nodded, tears glistening. "That's all I can hope for." We didn't embrace. We didn't plan a future. But as she walked away, I felt something uncoil in my chest, a bitterness loosening, leaving room for breath. The months that followed were a slow rebirth. With Claire's help, I secured a small grant to rebuild the shop. Tucker and I worked side by side, and each nail driven into wood felt like a heartbeat returning. Customers trickled back, first the brave ones, then the loyal ones, until the bays hummed again with the sound of engines confessing their ailments. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, I closed the garage and stood outside, grease still on my hands. For the first time since the square, I didn't feel broken. I felt rebuilt. Not the same man, but a stronger one, forged by fire and betrayal. Claire stopped by, a folder under her arm. "The feds want me in D.C., she said. "They need someone who understands Frost's labyrinth. But before I go, I wanted you to know something." She looked me straight in the eyes. "You're not just a mechanic, Marcus. You're proof that ordinary men can bring down giants. Don't forget that." I watched her drive away later that night, the taillights fading, and realized she was right. My revenge hadn't been about destruction. It had been about dignity, the one thing Frost could never buy, never fake, never steal. One last thread remained. Riker, the broken accountant who'd given me the ledgers, died quietly not long after Frost's arrest. No foul play, just a man whose body gave out after years of hiding. In his will, he left me a letter. "Marcus," it read, "thank you for carrying what I no longer could. Men like Frost win because the rest of us grow tired. You didn't grow tired. Keep listening for the sounds others ignore. They'll tell you where the next break is coming." I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer of my tool chest. A reminder that vigilance, not vengeance, was the real inheritance. The final reckoning came months later in court. I testified. Shelby testified. Claire, before leaving, delivered her reports with unflinching clarity. Frost sat across the room in an expensive suit that looked cheaper by the minute. He didn't glare at me anymore. He didn't threaten. He just stared, hollow, as if stripped of the power that had once made him untouchable. The judge read the verdict, guilty on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. Frost would serve years behind bars. And in that moment, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release, like an engine finally aligned after miles of grinding. Life after betrayal doesn't look like life before. My shop bore scars, my heart bore deeper ones. But there was freedom in scars. They tell you where you've been, and they warn others where not to cut. I still work late nights, the radio low, Tucker humming as he learns the craft. Alma still brings bread. Shelby sometimes stops by, not as a fiancé, not as a ghost, but as a friend trying to earn back her own dignity. And sometimes, when the air is quiet and the tools are still, I think of Claire and Riker, and the strange alliance that brought a giant to his knees. I am not who I was when the square humiliated me. I am not the man who stood frozen as his fiancée said yes to another. I am something else now, something harder, something freer, and if I've learned anything, it's this. Dignity isn't the opposite of revenge. It's the reason for it. The story ends not with a proposal, not with applause, but with the sound of an engine starting after too long silent, a machine made whole again, and for the first time in years, so was I.